Welcome back to the AI Lancet, everyone. It's great to be back.
It is.
Today we are going to be diving into issue 10425 of the Lancet from February 3rd, 2024.
Okay.
And as always, all the links to the full articles that we're going to be discussing are down in the description below.
Perfect.
And I'm Stanley.
I'm Agatha. And sometimes it feels like cutting-edge science is a world away. But today's deep dive really shows how it directly impacts people's lives.
Yeah.
We are going to be looking at how scientists are tackling typhoid fever, especially in young children.
Right.
And a brand new test that claims to be able to detect over 50 types of cancer from just a blood sample.
That's amazing.
I know.
So let's just jump right in.
That's it.
The first study that we're going to be looking at is the typhoid vaccine study by Priyanka D. Patel and their team.
Okay.
And this one is such a game changer because it targets a disease that hits young children especially hard.
Right.
So imagine you're in a region where typhoid is just a constant threat.
Yeah.
And you're trying to protect the most vulnerable members of your community.
For sure.
The problem is that the existing vaccines either weren't suitable for babies and toddlers,
Yeah.
or they required multiple doses, which is a logistical nightmare,
Absolutely.
especially in these areas.
Yeah, that's where this new vaccine called VTT comes in.
Okay.
And this study followed over 28,000 children in Malawi for 4 years.
Wow.
And the results were incredible.
Really?
This single-dose vaccine provides really strong, long-lasting protection, even in children under 2.
Wow, that's amazing.
We're talking about potentially preventing countless cases of typhoid fever and saving lives, especially in areas where access to healthcare is limited.
That's fantastic.
I know.
It's like finally having a shield that's both powerful and easy to use.
Exactly.
But amidst this good news,
Yeah?
the study also revealed a sobering reality,
What's that?
that almost all of the typhoid infections that they found were resistant to multiple drugs. So this means that, the antibiotics that we rely on are losing their effectiveness,
No.
which makes vaccines like VTT even more critical in the fight against typhoid.
It's a reminder that the world of microbes is constantly evolving,
Yeah,
and we need to keep innovating to stay ahead.
for sure.
Speaking of innovation, let's move on to that multi-cancer early detection test we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
the Grail Gallery test.
That one.
Yeah, early detection is considered the holy grail of cancer treatment.
Oh, really?
Because the earlier you catch it, the better the chances of survival.
Yeah, for sure.
So a blood test that can detect over 50 types of cancer sounds almost miraculous.
It does, but as with any new technology, I think it's really important to look beyond the hype and really carefully examine the evidence.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what Claire Turnbull and her colleagues did in their letter to the Lancet.
Okay.
They raised some serious concerns about the test's accuracy and the potential for some unintended consequences.
Okay, so what do they worry about?
Well, their biggest worry is that the test, while impressive, is not perfect.
Okay.
Its sensitivity for early-stage cancers, meaning its ability to correctly identify them, is only around 27.5%. So that means that it could potentially miss a significant number of cancers when they're most treatable.
Right, and I imagine that could have some serious consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
And what about false positives?
Yeah, so while a 0.5% false positive rate might seem small,
Right.
when you're testing millions of people, that translates into a huge number of individuals who are going to be getting potentially stressful and unnecessary follow-up tests.
That's a good point.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah,
You might end up with a lot of hay and still miss the needle.
for sure. And even if the test does detect cancer early, does that always translate to better outcomes?
That's a really good point.
It could just mean that people are diagnosed earlier but don't actually live any longer.
Yeah, and Turnbull and her colleagues also argue that the UK's National Health Service, the NHS, might be rushing into adopting this test
Really?
without enough solid evidence to support its widespread use.
So is the excitement over this new technology leading to hasty decisions?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
It is.
But Peter Johnson from the NHS has responded to these concerns, defending their decision to implement the test.
So what does he have to say?
Well, he emphasizes that the NHS is conducting a large, randomized controlled trial
Okay.
with over 140,000 participants,
Wow.
which will assess the test's impact on cancer-specific mortality.
So they're not just basing their decision on preliminary data.
Exactly. It's a calculated risk.
Yeah.
And they're gathering more data to make sure that it's worth it.
Okay.
Johnson argues that the NHS wants to be at the forefront of medical innovation and provide patients with access to promising new technologies as quickly as possible.
Right.
But only if they truly prove beneficial.
Of course, but this debate really highlights a really important question.
What's that?
How do healthcare systems balance the potential benefits of new technologies with the potential risks?
Yeah.
Especially when those technologies come with a pretty hefty price tag.
It's true, and it's not over yet either.
Really?
Turnbull and her colleagues acknowledge the randomized trial design,
Okay.
but they insist that cancer-specific mortality, not just early detection,
Right.
should be the primary endpoint.
So they're not backing down.
Not at all.
This back and forth really underscores the tension between wanting to implement potentially life-saving technologies quickly for adoption.
It's true.
It's a tough call. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a tough call for sure. And it brings up another issue we've seen throughout this issue of the Lancet.
What's that?
This idea of uncertainty.
Right.
How much uncertainty are we comfortable with when it comes to these potentially life-saving interventions? Right.
Right. It's a question that comes up again and again in medicine, especially when we're dealing with such complex conditions like cancer.
For sure.
Speaking of which, let's shift gears to the next article,
Okay.
which focuses on a specific type of kidney cancer
Okay.
called renal cell carcinoma, or RCC.
RCC, got it.
And this study was led by Maizara Azmi El-Reis and their team.
Okay.
And they looked at a treatment approach called adjuvant therapy.
Adjuvant therapy.
So imagine you've just had surgery to remove a kidney tumor.
Yeah.
Adjuvant therapy is kind of like an extra layer of protection.
Okay.
It's a treatment that's given after surgery to try and mop up any remaining cancer cells and reduce the risk of it coming back.
Like an insurance to your insurance?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This study found that a combination of two immunotherapy drugs,
Okay.
nivolumab and ipilimumab,
Uh-huh.
did not improve disease-free survival
Oh, wow.
compared to a placebo in patients with localized RCC.
So that was a surprise.
Yeah, it was a surprise because other immunotherapy trials have shown real promise in the adjuvant setting.
Right. And in fact, another study, Keynote 564, found that a different immunotherapy drug called pembrolizumab did improve disease-free survival in similar patients.
So why the conflicting results?
Right. Why?
Well, one possible explanation lies in the high rate of people who had to stop taking the nivolumab and ipilimumab combination in this Checkmate 914 trial.
Okay.
A whopping 43% of the participants discontinued treatment,
Wow.
mainly due to side effects.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's significant.
It's true that Keynote 564 also had a substantial discontinuation rate, about 38.9%,
Right.
but it was still lower than Checkmate 914.
Yeah,
And remember, Keynote 564 still showed a benefit from the immunotherapy drug.
right.
So the question becomes,
Yeah.
can we predict who's likely to benefit from adjuvant immunotherapy for RCC and who might experience those serious side effects?
Right. Can we personalize the treatment based on individual patient characteristics?
Exactly.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and it's one that researchers are actively investigating.
For sure.
It highlights the need to understand not just all a treatment works, but WHO it works for.
That's a great point.
Let's zoom out a bit and consider public health on a grand scale.
Right.
Remember the Tokyo 2020 and Beijing 2022 Olympics?
Oh, yeah.
Holding those massive global events during a pandemic seemed like an impossible feat,
It did.
but they actually pulled it off.
They did.
And this next article analyzes how they did it.
Okay, cool.
It's a fascinating case study in proactive planning and risk management.
Yeah.
Both organizing committees took a hope for the best, prepare for the worst approach,
Uh-huh.
and it paid off.
They didn't just cross their fingers in hopes of the best.
No, they used something called mathematical modeling
Wow.
to simulate all these different scenarios and predict the impact of things like vaccination rates and how easily different variants of the virus were spreading.
So they were running simulations.
Think of it like running a bunch of simulations to identify potential weak points in their plan and figuring out the best way to allocate resources.
Wow, that's really smart.
It wasn't just about models. They implemented rigorous testing protocols, including testing before athletes even left their home countries, testing upon arrival, and daily testing inside the Olympic villages.
Wow. So they created a safety bubble like no other.
Exactly, and it worked.
It did.
Despite the initial concerns about potential super spreader events,
Right.
Both games had incredibly low positivity rates and minimal transmission within the events.
That's amazing.
It demonstrates that even in the face of a global pandemic, large gatherings can be held safely with meticulous planning, robust testing, and a strong commitment to public health measures.
So the lesson we can apply to other events and gatherings in the future.
Absolutely. Now, for our final two articles, we are going to dive into some equally important but often overlooked aspects of healthcare.
Okay, what are those?
Specialized procedures
Okay.
and representation in global health initiatives. First up, let's talk about a condition called placenta accreta spectrum, or PAS.
Okay.
It occurs when the placenta attaches too deeply into the uterine wall, which can lead to life-threatening bleeding during childbirth.
Oh, wow.
This correspondence, initiated by Nuala Lucas Stefan Rex and Sarah Devroe, focuses on a procedure called the triple P,
Triple P.
which offers a potential alternative to a hysterectomy for managing PAS.
Now, hysterectomy, meaning the removal of the uterus, is a major surgery
Right.
with significant implications for a woman's future fertility.
Absolutely.
So having options that preserve the uterus is a big deal.
Huge.
So tell me more about this triple P procedure.
Okay, so the triple P stands for perioperative localization of the upper border of the placenta pelvic devascularization and resection of the placental and myometrial tissues involved.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But basically it involves carefully identifying the location of the placenta before surgery, temporarily blocking blood flow to the uterus, and then removing the affected tissues while minimizing blood loss.
So it's a complex procedure.
It is.
But it offers hope for women with PAS who want to preserve their fertility and avoid a hysterectomy.
It does. It's a reminder that medical advancements aren't always about these flashy new drugs or technologies.
Right.
Sometimes it's about refining those surgical techniques and expanding options for patients facing these difficult choices.
And there's Nigeria. They are struggling with a pretty serious doctor shortage. And it's gotten so bad that the Nigerian House of Representatives is actually thinking about a bill
Oh, wow.
that would require doctors who trained in Nigeria to work there for 5 years before they're allowed to emigrate.
That's interesting. Well, this is something that Nicholas Adrinto and Bolahan Olatunji brought up in their correspondence piece. And they make a really good point that while the bill has good intentions, it kind of misses the point. It doesn't really address the root causes of why doctors are leaving in the first place.
Right, so it's like trying to force a solution without actually fixing the problem.
Exactly. It's kind of like if you're a chef and you're being forced to work in a kitchen with broken ovens and dull knives, you're not going to produce your best work that way. And so Adorinto and Olatunji suggest that instead of restricting doctors' freedom of movement, Nigeria should focus on making its healthcare system something that doctors actually want to be a part of.
So basically make it a place they want to be rather than forcing them to be there.
Precisely. Investing in better pay, improving working conditions, making sure they have all the resources they need, those are the things that are really going to make a difference and attract doctors to stay in Nigeria. And they also talk about the potential benefits of collaborating with international organizations. These organizations can offer valuable training, mentorship, and knowledge exchange opportunities.
I see. So rather than a Band-Aid solution, it's focusing on the long term.
Exactly. And this raises the question, what are the long-term consequences of this bill? Could it actually make the problem worse? Could it discourage people from becoming doctors in the first place, or even further demoralize the doctors who are already working in really difficult conditions?
It's definitely something to consider. And it reminds us that, policies can have unintended consequences.
Absolutely. And finding effective solutions really requires us to dig deep. We have to understand the underlying issues and be willing to tackle them head on.
Speaking of public health challenges, let's shift gears and head over to Burkina Faso. They are facing a pretty serious dengue epidemic right now. In fact, it's the highest number of cases ever recorded in Africa.
Wow. This situation really highlights the issues that Olivia Manigart and their colleagues discussed in their correspondence piece. They brought up the lack of available diagnostic tests as a major obstacle in managing this outbreak. There are so many diseases with similar symptoms, so getting accurate testing is absolutely crucial to make sure we're identifying dengue cases correctly.
Right, because if you don't have the right clues, it's a lot harder and potentially even more dangerous to solve the mystery.
Exactly. Without that accurate and timely diagnosis, it's like healthcare providers are working in the dark. It makes it really difficult to implement the right treatment protocols and control measures effectively. Manigart's team proposes a multi-pronged approach to tackle this.
Oh, interesting. What do they suggest?
Well, they call for the development and implementation of effective point-of-care tests, something that can quickly and accurately diagnose dengue. And these tests need to be readily available even in low-resource settings. They also really emphasize the importance of clear regulatory guidelines for laboratory testing, just to make sure there's quality and reliability across the board.
Yeah, standardization is key, especially in an outbreak situation.
Exactly. And finally, they propose centralizing the distribution of these tests and reagents through national drug purchasing agencies. This would just make the whole process smoother and ensure that healthcare facilities can get the resources they need much more easily. And they even suggested the use of digital platforms to keep track of the distribution. This would increase transparency and accountability.
So it's a really comprehensive plan. It's not just about developing tests, but also making sure they're available, reliable, and easy to get.
Precisely. It's about understanding that scientific advancement, public health infrastructure, and logistics all have to work together.
Now let's dive into a topic that's been generating a lot of buzz in the medical community lately, and that is adjuvant cancer treatment. This is where things start to get really intriguing because we're seeing some conflicting results coming out of recent clinical trials.
Yeah, you're talking about the ongoing debate around adjuvant therapy for renal cell carcinoma. For those who aren't familiar with the term, adjuvant therapy is any treatment given after the primary treatment, so like after surgery, to lower the risk of the cancer coming back.
Right. And in this case, we're specifically talking about immunotherapy, which uses the body's own immune system to fight cancer.
Exactly. So there have been several clinical trials lately that looked at the effectiveness of immunotherapy as an adjuvant treatment for RCC, and the results, well, they've been a little mixed. For example, the Keynote 564 trial, which used the drug pembrolizumab, showed really promising results. The patients who got pembrolizumab had a much longer time before their cancer came back compared to the patients who received the placebo.
That's great news.
It is. But other trials, like the Checkmate 914 trial, which used a combination of nivolumab and ipilimumab, and the Emotion 010 trial, which used adalimumab, haven't shown that same level of benefit.
So why the inconsistency? If immunotherapy is so effective, shouldn't we be seeing more consistent positive results across the board?
Well, that is the million-dollar question. And it's something that Veronica Mullica and Francesco Massari discuss in their correspondence piece. They suggest that the biology of the tumor itself might be playing a key role here.
Ah, so not all tumors are created equal.
Precisely. And they might not all respond to immunotherapy in the same way. Malika and Massari emphasized that we need more research in this area to identify biomarkers that could help us predict which patients are most likely to actually benefit from immunotherapy. And they also stress the importance of being mindful of potential side effects, which in some cases can be pretty severe.
So it's all about finding that balance between potential benefits and risks and really making sure those treatment decisions are tailored to the individual patient's needs and circumstances.
Absolutely. We need to move away from the one-size-fits-all approach and really embrace the complexity of cancer and how it interacts with each person's body.
Now, there's this really thought-provoking editorial in this issue titled Cancer Research Equity: Innovations for the Many, Not the Few. It raises some critical questions about where cancer research is headed and how accessible these innovative treatments are to everyone.
It's a really important piece. It acknowledges the incredible advancements being made in cancer research, but it also shines a light on a pretty harsh reality. Cancer deaths continue to rise globally, especially in lower-income countries.
It's almost like there are two parallel universes. One where cutting-edge treatments are helping people live longer, and another where people are dying from cancers that could potentially be treatable or even preventable if they had access to basic care.
That's a powerful way to put it. The editorial argues that this gap really stems from the current focus of cancer research. A lot of the research is driven by pharmaceutical companies and tends to prioritize the development of expensive drugs and therapies.
Yeah, and those are important, but often out of reach for a huge part of the global population. It's like we're building these luxurious penthouses, but neglecting the foundation of the building.
Exactly. And so the editorial challenges us to think differently about what innovation means in the context of cancer research. They suggest that instead of just chasing the next blockbuster drug, we should prioritize research that leads to simpler, more accessible, and more affordable solutions.
Solutions that can really benefit a wider range of people, particularly those in lower-income countries.
Precisely. They highlight areas like early diagnosis, surgery, radiotherapy, and palliative care as areas with the potential to make a much more significant impact on cancer outcomes globally.
It's all about ensuring that the benefits of scientific progress are reaching everyone, and not just a select few.
Exactly. It underscores the need for a fairer distribution of resources and a greater focus on tackling the social and economic factors that contribute to health disparities.
Now, we've talked about representation and inclusivity in global health initiatives before, and there's another piece in this issue that really dives into that topic. It focuses specifically on the O'Neill Lancet Commission on racism, structural discrimination, and global health.
Right. Sandeep Maharaj and colleagues raised concerns in their correspondence about the lack of transparency and how commissioners are chosen for these incredibly influential global commissions. Their argument is that the selection process often lacks clear criteria, which can lead to certain regions and voices being underrepresented, especially those from lower-income countries.
Right. It's not about claiming there's some sort of conspiracy, but rather pointing out the potential for bias and the need for more transparency and accountability in the process.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that the people who are making decisions about global health actually represent the diversity of the populations that will be impacted by those decisions.
It makes perfect sense. After all, if you have a room full of experts with similar backgrounds and perspectives, you're likely to miss crucial insights and solutions that could benefit those who are most marginalized and vulnerable.
Absolutely. Maharaj and his colleagues suggest a few concrete steps to improve the selection process. Things like requiring honesty and integrity statements from commissioners, setting up clear criteria to ensure diverse representation, and even a recall mechanism if a region feels inadequately represented.
It's all about making sure that the people who are most affected by global health policies have a voice in the decision-making process.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond token representation and creating a truly inclusive global health landscape. But before we move on, I wanted to point out a section in this issue called Department of Error. It's a good reminder that even in a prestigious journal like The Lancet, mistakes can happen.
Oh yeah, the Department of Error. A reminder that even the best of us are human, and we all make mistakes sometimes.
Right. And it's important to acknowledge these errors and correct them quickly to maintain that scientific integrity.
So what kind of corrections are we talking about? Typos, factual errors, or something more substantial?
It's a mix. For instance, there is a correction regarding a comment about health and peace in the Eastern Mediterranean region. It seems they listed Sania Nishtar's affiliation incorrectly. It should have been the Senate of Pakistan, not the organization they originally mentioned.
So a simple oversight, but still important to get it right.
Exactly. Then there's a correction to the Tsinghua Lancet Commission on Health and Poverty Alleviation in China. It seems they misspelled the first author's name. It happens, but it shows how important it is to pay attention to detail in scientific publications.
It's a good reminder for all of us to double-check our work.
Indeed. And here's one that's a little more complex. A correspondence piece titled End Humanitarian Catastrophe in Conflict Settings needed to have a Crown copyright statement added. Copyright can be tricky, especially when you're dealing with such sensitive topics.
Absolutely. Accuracy and transparency are paramount, not just in the content itself, but also making sure you're following all the legal and ethical guidelines.
Precisely. And lastly, there's a correction to an article that looked at the effects of stopping oxytocin during active labor. This involved making changes to some of the table data and clarifying the threshold they used for the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale.
Making sure the data is accurate and the methodology is clear.
Exactly. So while these corrections might seem minor, they're crucial for making sure research is credible and that future studies are building on solid ground.
It's like building a house. You need a solid foundation for everything else to stand on.
A great analogy. Before we move on, there's another correspondence I wanted to mention. It deals with a sensitive topic, the Leppi murders and the role of autopsies in medical investigations.
That's the case of Lucy Leppi in the UK. The nurse who was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others. It's a truly horrifying case that left everyone wondering how something like that could go undetected for so long.
Exactly. And Sam Schuster, the author of this piece, asks a really important question. Could these murders have been discovered sooner if autopsies had been performed?
For those who might not know, an autopsy is the examination of a body after death to determine the cause of death.
Right. And Schuster argues that the decline in autopsies we've seen in recent decades might have actually played a role in this case. Autopsies can reveal crucial information that might not be obvious from just an external examination or other tests.
So it's not about saying autopsies should be mandatory, but rather encouraging us to reconsider their importance in modern medicine, especially in cases where the cause of death is unclear.
Precisely. While advancements in imaging and lab tests have definitely improved our ability to diagnose, Schuster believes autopsies still offer unique and valuable insights.
It's like having an extra tool in the toolbox. You might not need it all the time, but when you do, it's invaluable.
Exactly. And he points out that autopsies can also serve as a really valuable teaching tool, helping doctors learn from past cases and potentially improve care in the future.
So it's not just about solving crimes, but also about advancing our medical knowledge and making healthcare safer for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that even in death, there are lessons to be learned that can benefit the living.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. What stood out to you most about Schuster's argument?
You know, what I found particularly interesting was his focus on the social and cultural changes that have contributed to this decline in autopsy rates.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? What do you mean by social and cultural changes?
Well, it used to be that autopsies were a more routine part of medical practice. People saw them as a way to understand diseases better, learn from those who had passed away, and ultimately improve medical care.
So there was more emphasis on the societal benefits of autopsies.
Exactly. But over time, people started seeing autopsies as more of a personal choice rather than a societal necessity.
And I imagine that shift is influenced by many factors, right? More sensitivity around death, new medical technologies that offer alternative diagnostic options, concerns about cost and resources. It's complicated.
Absolutely. It's a mix of social, cultural, and technological influences. And while respecting individual choice is essential, Schuster encourages us to have a wider discussion about the potential benefits of autopsies, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
So it's about finding that balance between individual wishes and the potential for the greater good.
Precisely. It requires a nuanced approach, recognizing the complexities of death and dying, the progress we've made in medical technology, and the ethical questions surrounding post-mortem examinations.
Before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to remember a truly remarkable physician, Dr. Daniel Levi Ludmir. His obituary, written by Andrew Green, is a story that really resonated with me.
It's a powerful tribute to an amazing individual.
Dr. Ludmir's journey began in Peru. He had this dream of becoming a doctor that led him to Israel. He was known for his incredible selflessness, always going above and beyond for his patients and his colleagues. He even registered as a bone marrow donor, which speaks volumes about his character.
A true testament to his compassion and commitment to helping others.
Tragically, Dr. Ludmir lost his life while responding to a call to treat wounded victims during the recent Hamas attack. He was at home with his family when he got the call, and despite the danger, he still chose to go and help. He could have stayed safe, but his dedication to saving lives ultimately led to his own sacrifice.
Such a stark reminder of the risks that healthcare professionals face every day. It speaks to their incredible courage.
Dr. Ludmir's story is a truly profound one, and it leaves us with a lot to contemplate.
It really does. It makes you think about how we can support healthcare professionals and address the issues that put them at risk.
And appreciate the sacrifices they make each and every day.
Absolutely.
It's a powerful reminder that science and medicine don't exist in a vacuum.
They don't.
They're intertwined with social, economic, and political forces.
Absolutely.
And we need to be mindful of those influences as we strive to improve health for all.
Well said.
Yeah. It's like we've been saying throughout this entire deep dive into the Lancet science is rarely black and white.
Never.
There's always more to uncover, more perspectives to consider.
Yeah.
More questions to ask.
And that's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly.
This issue alone has taken us from the potential of a new typhoid vaccine to the complexities of cancer screening and treatment,
Yeah.
from the triumphs of public health measures at the Olympics,
Right.
to the importance of diversity and inclusion in these global health initiatives.
Right. We've seen how researchers are constantly pushing the boundaries of knowledge, developing new tools and techniques to combat disease and improve lives.
Absolutely. But we've also seen how each advancement comes with its own set of challenges and considerations.
It's not just about what we can do,
Right.
but what we should do.
Exactly. And those decisions, as we've seen, are often made in the face of uncertainty.
For sure.
We rarely have all the answers.
Right.
And we have to weigh the potential benefits against the potential risks,
Yeah.
sometimes with very limited information.
Think about the Gallery test.
Right?
You know, it holds the promise of detecting cancer early when it's most treatable.
Yeah.
But it also raises concerns about these false positives.
Yeah.
Overdiagnosis, unnecessary interventions.
Right. So how do we balance those competing factors?
Yeah, where do we draw the line?
It's a question that healthcare systems, policymakers, and individuals are all grappling with.
Right.
And it highlights the need for critical thinking, for carefully evaluating the evidence, and for engaging in these open and honest conversations about the trade-offs involved.
It's not about blindly accepting every new technology or treatment that comes along.
Right.
It's about asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Understanding the limitations.
For sure.
And making informed decisions based on the best available evidence.
And that goes for all of us,
Yeah.
not just the experts.
Right.
We live in an age of information overload,
We do.
especially when it comes to health.
It's true.
It's our responsibility to be discerning consumers of that information,
Yeah.
to question what we hear and read,
Right.
and to seek out reliable sources.
Don't just take things at face value.
No.
Dig deeper. Ask why.
Exactly.
And remember, there's rarely a one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another.
And as we've seen with that discussion on representation
Yeah.
in those global health initiatives,
Right.
it's crucial to make sure that diverse voices are included in the conversation.
Absolutely.
The more perspectives we consider, the better equipped we'll be to find solutions that work for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Lancet,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a few key takeaways.
Okay.
First, science is an ongoing journey of discovery, and there's always more to learn.
Right.
Second, embrace uncertainty.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask questions
Yeah.
and challenge assumptions.
It's good advice.
And third, remember that your health is ultimately in your hands.
It is.
Be an active participant in your healthcare decisions
Right.
and never stop being curious.
That's a great point to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course.
And as always, be sure to check out the full articles in the description if you'd like to explore any of these topics further.
Yes, definitely do that.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
See ya!